I came home from a business trip to find my wife at a hotel with a dangerous businessman, someone with a dark past and deadly connections. Days later, I was being followed, then crashed my car in a hit and run. I uncovered secret crypto accounts and plans to disappear with everything. This isn't just cheating. It's a battle for survival. Want to know how I dodged death and betrayal? Watch till the end. You ever come back from a business trip feeling like you've been on the moon, and then get hit with a reality check so sharp it might as well have been delivered by a knife? Yeah, that was me last week. I flew in late afternoon, dragging my suitcase through the airport with one eye on the clock, hoping to beat rush hour traffic and get home to some semblance of normalcy. I was counting on a quiet evening, maybe a beer, maybe a little TV. Definitely not a heart attack in slow motion. But life, as it often does, had other plans. See, I wasn't expecting anything unusual when I pulled out of the airport parking lot and started driving toward my neighborhood. My mind was on the presentation I'd just crushed in Dallas, the emails I'd have to answer tomorrow, and maybe what was for dinner. Because, let's be honest, after 5 days on the road, anything that isn't microwave lasagna feels like a win. Then, just as I'm approaching the exit for the main highway, something catches my eye. A familiar car. My wife's car. Parked right outside that fancy new hotel just off the interstate. You know the one, the place with the shiny glass facade, the lobby that looks like a spaceship, and prices that suggest you better have a trust fund or a very understanding credit card. Now this was weird, because my wife isn't the type to pop into hotels for no good reason, and I wasn't expecting her to be anywhere near town. I'd called her the night before to let her know I was landing early, and she sounded fine, normal, maybe even a little excited to see me. So what's she doing parked at a hotel that's not our usual dinner spot? Curiosity isn't exactly a fault of mine, but I also didn't want to jump to conclusions. I pulled over a bit further down the street, out of sight, but close enough to see through the restaurant windows. My heart beat a little faster, though I told myself it was just the leftover caffeine from the airport coffee. Bad coffee, but still. I watched. She was there, sitting at a table with a guy I didn't recognize. And by the way they leaned in and talked, it wasn't some casual business meeting or a chat with an old friend. No, this was something else. The guy looked like he'd stepped out of a slick magazine shoot. Perfect hair, tailored jacket, the kind of smile that says, I know exactly what I'm doing. My wife laughed at something he said. Not a polite laugh, not the that was funny kind. It was one of those laughs that seemed way too easy, way too intimate. I blinked, trying to process the scene. I wasn't mad, at least not yet, just stunned, maybe even a little impressed at the audacity. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few pictures, not because I was some vengeful lunatic, but because if I didn't, I'd swear the whole thing was a dream. And dreams don't often come with GPS stamps and high resolution. I drove to a bar a few blocks away. Not fancy, just the kind of place with a worn wooden counter, a decent whiskey selection, and bartenders who don't ask too many questions. The kind of bar where you can sit in the corner, nurse a drink, and let your brain try to make sense of a mess you never saw coming. I ordered a bourbon neat. No ice, no mixers, just straight and simple. Like the truth I was trying to swallow. The bartender, a guy with a scruffy beard and a friendly nod, poured the glass without a word. He didn't have to ask. Sometimes that's all you need. I sat there, staring into the amber liquid, thinking about how the last few days had been the longest, quietest, most confusing ones of my life. Watching that scene replay in my mind, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just trying to figure out what comes next when your life decides to throw a curveball at Mach 2. There's a kind of calm that comes with acceptance, not happiness or relief, but the quiet kind of calm where you realize the game just changed and you're gonna have to learn new rules. So, I sat there, drink in hand, planning how to stay standing when the storm hit. And yeah, that night was just the start of a story I never wanted to tell. But if you're going to get knocked down, you might as well make the story worth hearing. I sat in that bar for what felt like hours. Not because I was drowning my sorrows or screaming at the ceiling, but because that was the only way to make sense of the silence that filled my head. The bourbon was neat, and I made it last. No rush to dull anything. Sometimes you want the burn to remind you you're still alive. As I stared at that amber liquid swirling in the glass, my mind wandered back over the last few months. The subtle changes you never notice until someone points them out, or until the car parked outside that hotel makes you sit up and pay attention. It was the little things. The red teddy I found in her suitcase a couple months ago. Bright, sheer, and definitely not something I'd ever seen her wear. I kept it quiet, thinking maybe it was a surprise she planned for when I got home. Foolish, I guess. It looked brand new, tags probably still on, and I tucked it away without saying a word. Then the calls started to dwindle. When she was halfway across the country, I'd get daily video chats, flirty, teasing, the way lovers do when miles separate them. But since September, those calls slowed to once a week. Then, even those became a struggle to schedule. Some nights, her phone would go straight to voicemail, and I'd tell myself she was busy, tired, or just had poor service. She was working hard, after all. I was patient. Too patient, maybe. And that night before I left for Dallas, she'd worn one of my old t-shirts, oversized and comfortable. No red teddy in sight. It felt like a small betrayal, a secret she wasn't ready to share. I remember thinking, maybe she's tired. Maybe this is just how grown-up relationships ebb and flow. But now, sitting here, I realized it was the first quiet crack in the foundation. Funny how your mind clings to hope when reality's pounding on the door. I told myself I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger is for the weak, or so I'd learned growing up in a neighborhood that beat you up if you showed too much emotion. Instead, I was numb. That's worse. Numb means you're still standing, but unsure what you're standing for. My eyes drifted to the photos I'd snapped from the car. They were damning, but clean. Clear shots of her, the guy, the way she leaned in. The kind of evidence that says, this isn't a mistake. I'd taken a few extra, just to be sure. Not because I was collecting ammo for a fight, but because the truth deserves to be seen clearly. I took a slow sip and caught myself thinking about the last conversation we had on the phone. It was brief, the kind of exchange where she promised to call once back in Puerto Rico, but then never did. I remember my voice cracking a little when I asked if she was okay. She said she was, but it was a lie. Or maybe she didn't know herself. You get good at spotting those half-truths when you've been around the block. I thought about our marriage, the years before the long distance, the quiet dinners, the laughs that felt like a shield against the world. I wasn't perfect, far from it. I'd missed chances to say I love you, to ask, are we okay? But I thought love was supposed to be steady, the kind that doesn't need constant proof. Turns out, love can be sneaky. Sometimes it's quiet and still gets ripped apart when you're not looking. The bar was quieter now. The bartender was polishing glasses, giving me a nod like he knew the story but didn't want to say a word. I appreciated that. Sometimes you don't need advice or sympathy. You just need a witness. I pulled out my phone again, staring at those pictures. They felt like a weight and a release all at once. So, what now? I wasn't about to storm into that hotel or start a scene. That's not me. I'm not a guy who throws punches or slams doors. I'm the kind who sizes up the board, waits for the right move, and plays it smart. I knew I needed time. Time to think, to plan, to figure out if this was a one-night mistake or something deeper. The way she laughed with that guy wasn't accidental. There was history there, or at least enough chemistry to make a scene like that happen. But I wasn't done with us. Not yet. Because here's the thing about betrayal. It's messy, ugly, and it stings like hell. But it doesn't have to break you. It can teach you what you're really made of. I finished my bourbon, paid my tab, and stepped out into the cool night air. The world didn't stop turning, and neither would I. I'd taken the first step, quiet, deliberate, unshaken. And tomorrow, I'd figure out the next one. Morning came like it always does, rude and relentless, no matter how much you wanted to wait. I woke up with a dry mouth and a pounding head. Bourbon never was a great bedfellow. But the fog in my brain was sharper than usual. That photo of my wife and her mystery man sat on my phone like a silent challenge. I decided it was time to learn his name. There's something oddly satisfying about turning the tables from being the one in the dark to the one holding the flashlight. I wasn't about to chase down leads like some Hollywood vigilante. No, this was me, measured, strategic, patient. The photo was clear enough, not professional grade, but enough to get a good look at the guy's face. I pulled up my laptop and started running him through every face recognition engine and social media scavenger hunt I knew. Sometimes the internet feels like a small town with a bad memory. You just have to ask the right people. That's when I remembered Jerry. Jerry was an old acquaintance from back in the day. Not a close friend, more like one of those guys you run into every few years and exchange how's life and remember when. But Jerry had a knack for digging up dirt, a certain network that thrived in the shadows of corporate glitz. If anyone could help me put a name to that face, it was him. I sent Jerry a message, nothing dramatic, just a photo and the words, "Who is this guy? Need to know yesterday." It took a few hours. Jerry doesn't rush when it comes to business. But when he finally replied, it was with a name and a story that tightened my gut. Meet Victor Kane, big-time businessman, owns half the industrial parks around here and a few overseas ventures nobody talks about in polite company. Victor Kane, the kind of name that sounds more like a villain in a detective novel than a husband's rival. But Jerry didn't stop there. Dark past, too, he added. Rumors about deals gone sideways, lawsuits, maybe worse. If you're thinking about digging, tread carefully. That was Jerry's polite way of saying, this guy's not a Sunday brunch buddy. I sat back and let the information sink in. Victor Kane, towering figure in the city's business world, respected by some, feared by others. The kind of man whose smile in a photo hides 1,000 stories no one wants to hear. I wasn't intimidated. I was focused. The first step was obvious. Set up an investigation. Not the kind where you storm the guy's office or tail him in a rusty sedan. No, I wanted facts, clean and sharp. Proof to balance the photos on my phone. I picked up the phone and made a call to an old private investigator I'd heard about through a mutual friend. Not flashy, just effective. Someone who could navigate those shadowy business circles without raising alarms. I need to know everything on Victor Kane, I said when he picked up. Background, business dealings, personal life, the works. Discretion is key. Sounds serious, he replied, calm as a man who's heard it all before. It is, I said, and I'm paying top dollar. I didn't need to say more. The game was on. That night, I felt a strange kind of control. Not the control of a man who's lost everything, but of someone who's taking the first real step to understand the battlefield. Victor Kane might have a past darker than a moonless night, but I was no rookie. I had my own strength, my own strategy, and I wasn't about to let some slick businessman rewrite my story without a fight. The bourbon burn from last night had faded, replaced by a cold clarity. I was ready. Here's the thing about shock. It's loud on the inside, but it doesn't have to be on the outside. At least, not if you're smart enough to know when to wear the poker face. So, for now, I kept my mouth shut. Didn't let her catch even a flicker of what I'd uncovered. She probably thought I was jet-lagged, distracted, or maybe just glad to be home. The truth? I was a few moves ahead, quietly watching her, gathering clues like a detective at a crime scene. And there were plenty of them. Receipts. Messages I accidentally found on her phone when she left it unlocked. Strange withdrawals from our joint account. Subtle changes in her schedule. Late nights out that didn't quite add up. Then there was the chatter on her social media. Pictures, tags, posts that suddenly started making sense when lined up with what I'd seen at the hotel. Most damning of all was a series of encrypted cryptocurrency transactions she'd been making. Large sums moving through accounts I didn't recognize. Investments in some obscure digital shares that, frankly, I barely understand. But I knew enough to see the pattern. She was planning an exit strategy. Not just a quiet getaway, a full-on disappearing act to a tropical country where no one would come looking. And those crypto shares? That was her ticket out. That's when I realized the game wasn't just about who she was with. It was about what she was taking with her. Our money, my money, the life we built together. I sat with that knowledge for a while, letting it sink in. Then, as the bourbon the night before had taught me, you don't throw yourself at the storm, you use it. I decided to blackmail her. Cold? Maybe, but she'd made her choice, and I was done playing the fool. I wasn't going to beg for answers or plead for her to stay. Instead, I was going to give her a choice she couldn't refuse. I drafted the message in my head like a script. I know everything. The man, the money, the plans. You want to walk away with that kind of cash? Fine, but not without me. I didn't send it immediately. No, patience was key. I watched how she moved, what she said, who she called. I let her feel safe in her little bubble of lies. Then, when the time was right, I'd pull the trigger. And just to be clear, this wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about making sure she didn't walk away with what we built without answering for it. Because sometimes the quietest men make the loudest moves. I poured myself another drink, thinking about the tropical sun she was chasing, the life she thought she could start without me. Let her pack her bags. I was ready to pack mine too, right into the next chapter. Shock's a funny thing. Inside, it feels like a firecracker, loud and explosive, threatening to blow apart every calm thought you've ever had. But on the outside, sometimes it's as quiet as a shadow slipping through a dark room. That's the mask I wore that day. Not because I was cold-hearted, though maybe a little, but because I knew better. Knowing what I knew, showing anything but calm would be like handing her the reins, and I wasn't about to do that. So, for now, I played the part of the oblivious husband, the tired guy just glad to be home after a trip, the one who laughed a little too loudly at a dumb joke,
who helped unload the bags and asked about her day like nothing was wrong. She didn't get a hint, not from my face, not from my voice, nothing. And that was on purpose. Because while I was quiet on the surface, beneath it, I was working, gathering, watching, piecing together a puzzle I didn't want to believe but couldn't ignore.
The clues were there, stacked like a case file on my desk. First came the little things. The phone left unlocked, that rare mistake she made while rushing out the door. A glance, a text message popping up for just a second before she grabbed the screen away. Something about meeting later, don't tell, and a string of names I didn't recognize. Then the receipts. Not the everyday coffee or groceries. These were charges at upscale restaurants, fancy bars downtown, and a few luxury boutiques. Places where you don't go for a quick errand. Places where someone tries to impress. I dug deeper into our finances. Our joint account showed withdrawals that weren't small. Cash pulled out in multiple locations, always in neat, round numbers that screamed planned, not spontaneous. When I asked about them, she'd brush it off with a tired smile and say, just some work stuff. Work stuff, sure. The social media was another layer. She'd always been careful, but subtle things slipped through. Tags, posts, friends' comments, a vacation planned for business, a photo of a beachside hotel she just loved, a new friend she introduced as a colleague. None of it matched the life I thought we had. Then came the cryptocurrency trail. Now, I'll admit, digital money isn't my strongest suit. The whole blockchain thing might as well be a foreign language spoken by nerds in basements. But I know enough to see when someone's moving serious assets. Her investments had been growing steadily in some obscure tokens and digital shares I'd never heard of. The amounts moved were significant, enough to buy a one-way ticket to paradise and then some. And judging by the timing and destinations of the transfers, it was clear she was building a war chest for a getaway. It hit me hard. She wasn't just sneaking around with some guy. She was planning an escape, taking our money, our future, and turning her back on everything we'd built. I sat with that truth for a long time, let it roll around in my mind until it lost its edge. Then I started thinking about how to respond. Anger? Sure, it flared now and then, like a candle blown by the wind, but it wasn't the answer. Neither was confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I chose leverage. Blackmail. The word sounds ugly, and maybe it is. But sometimes life hands you a loaded gun, and it's up to you whether you pull the trigger or just point it. I drafted the message in my head like a contract, not begging or pleading, not demanding or threatening, just facts, clear, undeniable facts. I know everything. The man, the money, the plan. If you want to walk away with that kind of cash, fine, but I'm coming with you. I wanted to give her a choice that wasn't a choice at all, a line drawn in the sand. But I didn't send it right away. Timing is everything. I watched her carefully, noting how she moved through the house, who she called, how she answered my questions without really answering. I wanted her to think I was clueless. I wanted her to relax into the lie while the noose slowly tightened. Patience was the weapon I wielded. Because when the time came, I wouldn't just be the man who caught his wife cheating. I'd be the man who held all the cards. I poured myself another drink that night, the liquid warm and steady in my hand. I thought about that tropical country she dreamed of running off to. The sun, the sand, the anonymity. Let her pack her bags. Let her dream her dream. I'd be ready with my own plans, on my terms. Because sometimes the quietest men make the loudest moves.
The decision to write the letter sat heavy on my mind for days, not because I doubted what I needed to do, but because I knew once it was out there, there'd be no going back, no undo button for the chaos that would follow. But that was the point. I needed to take control again, and silence wasn't an option anymore.
I spent an evening pacing my living room, the glow from the laptop screen flickering against the walls. My fingers hovered over the keyboard more times than I care to admit, crafting words that were simple but loaded. I wanted to hit hard without sounding desperate or unhinged. Because no matter how raw the betrayal, I wasn't going to stoop to emotional theatrics. I was better than that. Or at least I had to be. The letter came together like this. I'm aware of everything. The man, the money, and the plans you're making to disappear with it all. I'm giving you a choice. Leave the money accessible, or don't bother trying to walk away. This isn't a threat, it's a promise. I will come with you, and I will not be quiet. It was short, to the point, unwavering, no room for misinterpretation. I didn't print it on fancy paper or seal it with wax. No theatrics, just a typed page in a plain envelope sent through the mail to her address, the one she still called home, even if she acted like she was already halfway out the door. That letter was my way of saying, I know, and you're not going to get away with it. After sealing the envelope, I watched the mail carrier walk away with a strange mix of dread and relief. A chess piece had moved. Now the board was open. What I didn't expect was the next move on their side. Because she didn't keep the letter to herself. No, she handed it over, straight to him. Victor Kane. That fact hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd imagined she might try to hide it, destroy it, or at least keep it under wraps until she figured out her next step. Instead, she chose to let him read it. I don't know if she thought it was a smart move, like an olive branch to the man she trusted more than me, or if she was desperate, trying to share the burden of my threat with her shadowy lover. Whatever the reason, that decision changed everything. Victor Kane wasn't just any man. He was a businessman with teeth, sharp ones. Jerry's warning about Kane's dark past wasn't just chatter. This was a man who played rough, who protected his interests with a ruthless grip. And a letter threatening to expose his involvement? That was a challenge Kane wouldn't let slide. I imagined the moment he read it. That smile, the confident, calm one I'd seen in the photo, probably snapped into something colder. His mind spinning, figuring out how to respond, how to turn a threat into an opportunity or a weapon. Because that's what men like Kane do. They don't cower, they counterstrike. Meanwhile, I sat on my end of the board, eyes sharp but calm, unaware of the storm starting to gather on the other side. The kind of storm that doesn't make noise until it hits. I found myself thinking about the life I thought I had. The years, the trust, the shared plans. Now all tangled with deception, half-truths, and dangerous men. But beneath it all, something solid remained. Me. Quiet, steady, ready. I wasn't naive enough to think this would be a simple chess match. No, this was war. Just the quiet kind, the kind fought in shadows and whispers. I poured myself a drink, the burn comforting and familiar. I didn't need to know what Kane was planning yet. I just needed to be ready. Because whatever came next, I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Blackmail sounds like something you see in a movie. Envelopes slid under doors, shadowy threats typed on old typewriters. But in real life,
It's faster, colder. It's 3 sentences typed on a phone screen at 1:17 a.m., your thumb hovering over the safety on a pistol.
And that's exactly how I did it. I'd been sitting in the dark for over an hour. No TV, no music, just the soft glow of the phone screen, my heartbeat loud enough to hear. The photos were still saved in my gallery. Her laughing with that man at the hotel, the way her hand brushed his, the undeniable intimacy of it all. I'd replayed the scene so many times in my head it felt like a memory of something I never lived, only watched. Now it was time to act. I didn't yell, I didn't confront her at home, slam a door, or ask how could you, like some guy in a bad soap opera. I waited until she left, said she was going to get groceries. I watched her drive off, probably heading somewhere that had nothing to do with groceries unless they started stocking betrayal in the freezer aisle. Then I typed it out, slowly, deliberately. No fluff, just power. I know about him. I know about the money. If you think you're disappearing with everything, think again. You'll either bring me in or I bring it all down. Your choice. Short, sharp, just enough to let her feel the ground shift without kicking it out from under her. I hit send and stared at the screen like it was going to explode. Then I waited. For 5 minutes, nothing. No typing dots, no reply. Just that cold blue light and the familiar silence of being the last to know. I didn't expect a thank you. I wasn't expecting tears either. But I was expecting something. Maybe a text saying we need to talk, or one of those clumsy attempts at denial. Instead, I got radio silence. Which told me one thing. She wasn't planning to face this alone. I found out later, too late, that she didn't keep the message to herself. No, she showed him. Victor Kane. Now, let's take a second here. I wasn't born yesterday. I knew Kane was bad news the moment Jerry sent me that name. You don't get that rich without stepping on people. And based on Kane's reputation, he wasn't the step on your toes type. He was the crush your throat and smile while doing it type. When I sent that message, I thought I was pressuring her. I didn't know I was lighting a fuse under a man like Kane. It's almost funny, in a bleak way. I'd spent all this time watching her, calculating her lies, analyzing her lies. Meanwhile, I hadn't stopped to consider that she might not be the top of the food chain anymore. She wasn't the queen in this little betrayal. She was the pawn. And Kane? He didn't like pawns talking about kings. I imagined the scene in my head. She gets the message, reads it, panic creeps in. She rushes to him, shows him my text like a scared kid hiding behind Dad's leg. What should I do? She probably asks. I doubt Kane appreciated that. I don't know exactly how he reacted, at least not yet. But I know men like him. They don't run. They don't negotiate with unknowns. And they sure as hell don't tolerate threats, subtle or otherwise. What I'd intended as leverage might have just turned into a problem bigger than I could see coming. Back on my side of town, I waited, watching the phone, checking the driveway, listening for the tone of her voice when she got back from her errands. She didn't bring it up, didn't act rattled. If anything, she was almost too normal. She asked if I wanted anything from the store, made small talk about weekend plans, and even smiled. That same smile she used to give me before I knew how far she'd gone. I didn't let on. I stayed calm, masked, observing. But inside, something was shifting. I realized I wasn't dealing with a simple case of infidelity. This wasn't about heartbreak. This wasn't even about marriage anymore. It was about survival. Because now, a dangerous man knew I existed. And worse, he knew I wasn't staying quiet. I've never been a paranoid man. I don't check behind shower curtains or think the government's tracking my toothpaste. But the thing about paranoia is, when the danger is real, it's just called awareness. It started subtle. A car that showed up in my rear view one too many times. A white Dodge Charger, tinted windows, parked across from my house. Didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. Then again, most assassins don't send postcards. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence, maybe a neighbor's guest. But on Monday, I saw it outside my gym. Tuesday, I saw it outside the coffee shop I never told anyone I go to. Wednesday, it was 3 cars behind me on the way home. Never close enough to panic, just close enough to remind me I was being watched. Victor Kane. The name circled my brain like a vulture. If he read my message, and I had every reason to believe he had, he wasn't going to leave things to chance. Not a man like him. He wouldn't send a warning. He'd send a problem. Permanent, quiet, and efficient. I started double locking the doors, took the long way home, changed my routines. Didn't matter. The fear crawled into bed with me every night and curled up like a pet snake. That's when I knew I was past the point of bluffing. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted out. But escape costs money, and conveniently, I knew exactly where to find it. Crypto. My wife's secret stash, her little tropical nest egg, the digital pot of gold she thought she'd take and ride off into the sunset with Kane, or whoever the hell she thought she'd be when she vanished. But it wasn't hers alone. That money came from years of us, years of my effort, my patience, my belief that we were building something real. And now, that money was survival fuel, and I didn't plan on asking nicely. Over the past few weeks, I'd been watching her, not just emotionally, technically. Passwords, patterns, which devices she used. I saw the exchanges she logged into, the digital wallets, the ones she thought were cleverly hidden behind layers of 2-factor codes and VPNs. Cute. But I had time, and a very good reason to learn fast. By Thursday night, I had access. She'd made one mistake, one lazy, careless mistake. She saved a recovery seed phrase in her iCloud backup. Probably didn't even know it synced, but I knew. And that one little oversight meant I now had the master key to the vault. I didn't move yet. I needed to be sure. First, I checked the balance. 7 figures. Not enough to buy an island, but more than enough to vanish, if you know where to go and how to stay gone. I stared at that number on the screen like a man staring at the edge of a cliff, terrified but tempted. This was it, my ticket out. She wouldn't know right away. Crypto doesn't ping you with your ex just emptied the wallet. And with Kane's people watching me, I didn't have the luxury of hesitation. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the windows, checked the door locks twice every hour. At one point, I swear I saw movement outside, the glint of a phone screen. But I wasn't about to turn on lights and paint a target on my chest. If someone wanted me, they'd have to work for it. By morning, I'd made my decision. I was taking it all. Call it theft, call it revenge, I call it insurance. I made the transfer in pieces, small enough to not trigger alerts on the chain. moved it through tumblers, mixers, and privacy wallets, set up a burner phone, encrypted email, and a second identity under a name I'd used once in college when I nearly got arrested during spring break. Fitting, I suppose. Every move, every click felt like I was playing chess with a loaded gun on the table. By midday, I'd rerouted the entire portfolio into cold storage, offline, untouchable. Only I knew the keys. Only I had the exit plan. I looked at the numbers one last time and shut the laptop. My hands were steady, calmer than they'd been in weeks. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just trying to escape anymore. I was winning. Maybe not in the way people dream of, not in some moral sense, but in a way that mattered. I was alive, free, and soon I'd be gone. The thought made me smile, just a little. Let her have Cain. Let him chew on his pride when he realizes she can't deliver. Let her figure out how to explain why the money's missing, why the wallet's empty, and why the quiet husband she thought would fold just became the biggest threat in her life. I'd vanished from her heart a long time ago. Now I was about to vanish for real. By the end of the week, I had everything lined up, every account closed, every excuse planted. I'd cashed in the vacation time I never took, canceled the gym membership, forwarded my mail, wiped my phone. There wouldn't be a trace of me left behind that I hadn't deliberately planted. The destination? Panama. Not glamorous enough to raise eyebrows, not chaotic enough to be unsafe, just foreign enough for a man to vanish. And with the crypto I moved, I could live well for a long time. Long enough, at least, to let this whole mess burn out behind me. The ticket was digital, one way, no checked bags. Just a backpack with essentials. Cash, documents, a burner phone, backup passport, thank you, old army buddy, and a hoodie that didn't make me stand out in a crowd. I had it all down to the hour. My flight was at 7:25 p.m. I planned to leave home at 4. Airport traffic, security lines, a beer before boarding. It was supposed to be smooth, quiet, like a professional disappearing act. But the street was different when I stepped outside. The white Dodge Charger was there again. Same place, same angle. Engine off, windows too dark to see inside. It hadn't moved all week. It just appeared wherever I was. At the gym, outside the UPS store, one time at a gas station. It never got too close, never made a move, but it watched. And I had the sinking feeling today wouldn't be any different. I tightened the backpack straps across my chest and walked to my car with purpose, head high, like nothing was wrong. But every step echoed louder than the last. My keys shook a little when I unlocked the door. Not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to notice. I pulled out of the driveway and didn't look in the rearview mirror right away. I waited. 1 block, 2. Then there it was. A couple of car lengths back, right lane, same distance, same Charger. I could feel it now, not just in my mind, but in my gut. That primal squeeze of danger you can't ignore, even if you tell yourself you're being dramatic. I switched lanes. So did he. I took a turn I didn't need to take, down Maple, then right again onto Southwind, a street that loops like a cul-de-sac without the charm. He followed. No more guessing, no more pretending this was normal. Whoever was in that car wasn't just watching anymore. They were escorting me. And suddenly my breath shortened. Not fear exactly, but urgency. That thrum in the chest that says, "Move now, fast." The airport was 10 miles out,
10 miles of open road, wide lanes, and too many places to disappear from view. I had to get there, get through security, and get on that plane. I took a left onto Highway 18, sped up. My hands started sweating on the wheel. The Charger stayed 2 cars behind, close enough to keep me nervous, far enough to stay innocent. That's when I broke. I'm not proud of it, but I panicked. I cut across 2 lanes to the exit ramp, too fast. Tires squealed. A horn blared behind me. My heart jumped into my throat as I flew down the off-ramp, trying to shake him, trying to throw him off. But he followed. Of course he did. And then I made a mistake. I looked in the rear view too long. Just a second, maybe less. That's all it took. I missed the light ahead turning red. The truck in front of me slammed on its brakes. I didn't.
The crunch of metal and the explosion of glass weren't what shocked me. What shocked me was the stillness that followed. The instant silence, like the whole world took a breath and forgot how to exhale. Airbag in my face, blood in my mouth, horn blaring. I blinked hard, dazed. My chest burned from the impact. The car hissed like it was angry. Outside, people were already gathering. And behind them, the Charger? But this time, it didn't stop. It drove right past. Gone. Just like that. As if the job was done. As if I wasn't worth following anymore. And in that moment, for the first time in this whole mess, I felt real fear. Not just of Kane, but of how close I'd come to winning and how quickly it had all unraveled. I reached for the backpack. It was still there, crushed against the passenger seat. But I wasn't moving fast now. I wasn't moving at all. Sirens were already in the distance. And Panama? It might as well have been the moon. 3 weeks after the crash, I woke up in a hospital bed under a name that wasn't mine. Let me back up. The wreck totaled the car. I was knocked out cold, bleeding from the mouth, a few ribs shattered. But not dead. Not dead, which apparently was a problem. Because within hours of arriving at the hospital, 2 plainclothes men showed up. Not doctors, not cops. Friends, they said. The nurse was smart enough to stall them. She tipped off one of the interns who'd served overseas. Guy knew trouble when he saw it. Checked my wallet, saw what I was carrying, and made a decision. He swapped my ID with a John Doe tag from the trauma ward. Then they moved me. Different room, different floor, different name. And when I came to, he was there, sitting by the bed. "Don't ask questions," he said. "Just know someone up there likes you, or at least hates whoever was tailing you more." Turns out, Victor Kane's reach didn't end at local tough guys and offshore crypto, but neither did mine. Remember Jerry? Yeah, Jerry had been busy too, real busy. In the time between me going dark and crashing a Honda into a truck, Jerry traced Kane's assets, offshore accounts, and, get this, connections to 2 missing persons cases, one in Nevada, one in Colombia. Turns out Kane had a habit of tying up loose ends, and I was next on the list. But what Kane didn't know is that someone else had been watching him. An old client of Jerry's, ex-Fed, now freelance, had been looking for a way to bring Kane down for years. I was the perfect bait. The guy with the smoking gun, the motive, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. So they made me an offer. Disappear. Completely. Legally, I'd be dead within a month. Kane would be taken down. The crypto I stole? That was the icing. They wanted it, but not for themselves.
They wanted to track it, follow the flow, tie it to Kane's shell companies. "Help us bury this bastard," they said, "and we'll give you a new name, new passport, and a quiet beach with no questions asked." And you know what? I took the deal. I didn't get revenge. I got erasure. And in the end, that was enough. Victor Kane went down in flames 6 months later. Some white-collar suicide that made national headlines. My wife, she played innocent. She cried on TV, claimed she was a victim. Last I heard, she remarried some finance guy in Tampa. Good for her. As for me, I live somewhere warm now. I tend bar at a beach shack. I've got a dog with 3 legs and more common sense than most people I knew back home. And I sleep easy, not because justice was served, but because I was. Sometimes surviving is the most unexpected ending of all. And sometimes the best revenge is letting everyone think you're dead, while you drink whiskey in peace.